Hello, and welcome to the fourth episode of Enchanting Economics in New Mexico. This podcast is a production of Beaver, the recognized expert in socioeconomic data for the state of New Mexico. I'm your host, Rayanne McKernan, and today we're going to continue our series on coronavirus and its effects in the New Mexico economy. Here with me is Sarun Lytle, our Beaver programmer, and also Cynthia Shultz. She's the CEO of Bradbury Stamm Construction. It's the largest and oldest general contractor in New Mexico. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, this is something everybody's talking about right now.
So for those who aren't familiar with the construction industry, especially the industry in New Mexico, can you give us a general idea of what operations are like prior to the COVID-19 epidemic?
Yeah, so I think like every business, every place on earth, right, we're all going, wow, it's only been a month, and what a difference that month makes. So I think you kind of wanted me to also just talk a moment about the company, but we were probably in very much the same position as the industry. We were coming off of a great year in 2019. I know the employment growth in New Mexico for construction year over year in February was over 10%, pretty substantial. There've been a lot of increases in wages across the board. If you talk to most contractors, frankly, across the nation, we're in a number of trade organizations, peer groups, those kinds of things. Everyone was kind of carrying, some of the biggest backlogs they'd had. And so I guess I would say the industry was doing very well. There was a lot going on here in New Mexico. I know there'd been a lot more private work than there'd been in a long time. And you really see, towns changing because of that, which was really great. So not only was there a lot of public investment, but there was a lot of private investment. And so it was very interesting as we kind of went into this very quickly from, things are great kind of scenario. And granted, it always varies. There's different niches that come and go, right? You're building a lot of senior living one year, maybe there's none the next year, those kinds of things. But I think over the whole, things were very positive. And then March came, and I think everyone's kind of adjusting to that a little bit. And I don't know if you want me to kind of go into that.
No, that was my next question. Coronavirus really started to spread in March, and I was wondering how you and your employees and the industry as a whole, how you guys are doing with all this.
Well, for me personally, it was a little tricky. I actually left the country on March 6th, before there was any cases in New Mexico, and before there was very many where I was going. I actually went to Spain, which is now in the news as one of the worst places. And at the time, we kind of felt like we made a good, thoughtful decision to still go. We ended up coming back 4 days later, when everything got so much more stressed, etc. And even coming back through customs, all those things, there was still no asking us to quarantine, any of those kinds of concern, where, even 3 days later, that really changed pretty dramatically. So for me personally and the company, I was in quarantine when I came back, and frankly on probably the week when we needed the most leadership. And I was very fortunate that we have amazing people that were really able to step up, because what's kind of interesting, it's like all significant events come down to the change period, right? And the worst thing is not knowing what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And so the highest stress point, I think, for the industry was probably from, like March 13th through about the 24th, when the governor came out with the stay-at-home instruction, and construction was noted as essential. Okay, because I think up to that point, every day, everyone was kind of like, are we going to still be working? What's going to happen? And just to give some context, in New Mexico, construction employment is about 6% of the folks in the state. So it's pretty substantial. It's not like some of these industries that unfortunately have been incredibly impacted. But it was all of those things going. And I like to think part of the reason we were essential is we need infrastructure. We need a lot of things. need infrastructure, but we also need these skill sets and these capabilities as we go forward, even after this. And as an industry, we spend a lot of time working about the safety of people, right? And how do we keep them safe, productive? We have to balance all these things and what can be very changing and potentially unsafe conditions on a job site. And so I like to think part of the reason most of the country has accepted the construction industry still working is because they believe we could implement policies necessary to make it as safe as reasonable while still trying to be able to produce. So we've been doing social distancing, all those things. I mean, on March 13th, we spent a lot of time, kind of revising our policies on our job sites to try to ensure that we can continue working. It's an interesting balance.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it from an economics perspective. Usually you always want to try to keep people working. That's their livelihood. That's, what helps them take care of themselves, all those things. And this is probably the first time where we've had to try to balance this, what's good for the public health, right? Which might not be everyone working. It's been a very stressful decision-making process on what's exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah. And I know your company specifically has other offices in other states like Minnesota, Texas, Colorado. Are those locations also feeling it the same way as we are here?
Absolutely. At this point, I believe it's like half the world is kind of operating under a stay-at-home order.
Yeah.
So it's definitely the case. I do think it's beneficial kind of seeing different locations and what they implement when, it's kind of that, okay, this already happened there, we know it will happen here. And I think that's benefited New Mexico, because we weren't really in the first wave. Again, our first case, I believe, was March 11th. And I think that's part of the reason we haven't seen more of a rapid uptick in cases. We were able to learn from these other states and countries.
Yeah. I mentioned, when we made the introductions, that your company is based in New Mexico. This is where it was founded. I don't know if people realize how active you guys have been in the community. For instance, I saw, the last 2 years, you guys have awarded high impact grants to support education programs in the state. And I'm sure you guys have done other things as well. What are you doing, or are you looking to do anything as a company or in your industry just to continue operations and to show support?
No, absolutely. I think that's kind of been the challenge a little bit right now. One thing that we did do, and I kind of highlight to anyone who's in that position to do it, we pulled forward any of our kind of corporate giving or events we support, those kinds of things. We know those events aren't going to happen. There isn't going to be any breast cancer walk this year or whatnot. So trying to sit down and go through and get that money out there to the nonprofits right now, because a lot of them are being impacted by programs that they can't run. Sometimes it's one program helps pay for other programs and all those things, and it's really, really creating a difficult picture. So we did do that, and then we also decided to just immediately do $100,000 to kind of humanitarian organizations, kind of most immediately, predominantly food banks in the communities we work in. So it's kind of spread out all over the state as well as in Minnesota, where our other kind of significant office is. And then we just keep trying to figure out what else can we do, and it's such an interesting time. We're trying to support local restaurants. But meanwhile, we have some folks that are like, oh, well, should we actually do that? Is that the right? And it's like, yeah, we're going with we've got to support the economy where we can approach. And we'll continue to do more. Obviously, our grant program this year, we're looking for the same innovation I think we're going to see in healthcare, heck, in our business, right? We're changing some of our best practices, and they'll be changed for long term, which will be a good thing. I'm looking for some of these nonprofits to also innovate, right? There's nothing like a crisis, unfortunately, to create that. And so that's hopefully the lining of what's going to happen as we go forward. But we're fortunate. I mean, we've been part of this community for a long time. And we prepared, frankly, for these types of events. We're kind of designed around, there always can be a recession, and construction is typically hit fairly hard right now. Honestly, a lot of the industry is still working. It's very much a hit and miss where you're at and what your project for. Companies that have huge impacts, and there's others that have less.
Well, that's all I really had for you, Cynthia. I really, really appreciate you coming on and talking to us and letting us know what's going on. And thank you for your efforts in the community. I'm sure if everyone could, they would tell you thank you.
No, it's fair. I think this is a time when everyone is doing a lot, whether they feel like they are or not. I think it's amazing to see our community come together. And I think that's the other silver lining. Our community is going to come together stronger than ever. And I think New Mexico, by far, is the unique state that can do that in a way no other state can do it, as well as the innovation. And so those will be the positive things, but it's going to be a long haul to get through this period.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. I hope you stay healthy and can maybe reschedule your trip to Spain. As far as this episode, I think that finishes us up here at Enchanting Economics. Don't forget that you can check us out at Beaver, that's bber.unm.edu, or you can get us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under @UNMBeaver. Thank you all for joining us. Stay home and stay healthy.